Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special Flower Power Live. Tonight is the 100th Flower Power Show, and it's actually also the end of Flower Power in this iteration. So stay tuned to the end, and I will give you some more information about it. And what a better night to celebrate than All Hallows Eve. Samhain in the Celtic tradition is this holiday that we're celebrating right now. And tonight we have a somewhat magical herb to talk about that is perfect for this particular time of year. And that herb is mugwort. So, welcome everyone. I'm Allison from the Well Cultivated Life. And as I just said, I've been doing Flower Power now since November 2020 when I made a commitment to show up just about every week and share tips and tidbits and all my favorite things, my love of plants and herbs and the mysterious parts of the plants that go along with it. So, thank you to all of those who have been following me along all these years. And I just want to warn you, this might be a kind of long show tonight because I got very excited about some of the things that I wanted to share. So, sit back and relax and let's get into talking a little bit about what is happening tonight. Well, happy Halloween to all of you here in the US. And I'm not sure if Canada celebrates Halloween the same way that we do, but this, from a sort of celestial and seasonal point of view, is what's called the cross quarter of the year. And this is the midpoint between an equinox and a solstice. And in the Celtic tradition, like I said, it's called Samhain, which is spelled nothing like how I just pronounced it. I had to practice that one for a while. But it's also the official sort of end of the harvest season, and we're entering into the darkest time of year with the shortest days until we reach the winter solstice, where the day length will start to increase again. And so, like I said, there's lots of traditions that happen around this time of year to celebrate this transition. And one of the things that kind of runs through all different cultures is the idea that this is a time of year when we have more access to the spiritual world. And this is why you see things like ghouls and goblins on Halloween. But truthfully, that is more a celebration of those who have passed on before us in most cultures, such as the Day of the Dead, which is celebrated in Mexico. And this access to the spiritual world is kind of a cool aspect that coincides with mugwort, our plant of the day. And what we often hear is that the veil is thin. And I'm like, well, what does that really mean? And it really means that we have an opportunity to sort of be on the edge and access more intuitive, if you will, messages and be open to receive those. And mugwort is a plant that helps to enhance that aspect of ourselves. But first, I want to tell you a little bit about the plant itself. Mugwort is Artemisia vulgaris, and it is sometimes associated with the summer solstice, but um, that's because it's growing then, and one of its main characteristics that it helps to enhance dreams. But it can be harvested and dried and used at all times of year. So it's not just for the summer solstice. And it has many cousins. There's about 400 in the sort of Artemisia genus or not necessarily just the genus, but some of those include wormwood, which is what absinthe is made out of, sagebrush, tarragon, and southernwood. Those are a few. And they're all in the Asteraceae family, which is the daisy family. Now, when we think of daisy, we think of, a composite flower that it looks like a flower. But I'm going to say wormwood. Mugwort does not have a flower like that. It actually has a very small wind-pollinated flower. And I had harvested this a few weeks back. So you can see this is the dried flower, after the plant has stopped flowering, and these flowers are minute on here, but they are again in the Asteraceae family. Now they can have these types of plants can be either an herb or they can be a shrub like the sagebrush is. And they have been used in gardens because they have a wonderful silvery sort of a foliage to them. And I found one last mugwort still alive out in the garden. And so you can see that while the top side of the plant is very green, on the underside you have this beautiful silver um, color to it. And other artemisias are much more silver than that. And a lot of times it has to do with the small hairs on them. And those hairs have a special use that I'll tell you about in just a little bit. Now, it's pretty easy to grow. In fact, it's kind of a weedy sort of a species. You wouldn't, especially the mugwort, you wouldn't necessarily plant it in your garden intentionally. But this silvery aspect to them has made them associated with the moon or Artemis, which is the moon goddess. And again, they are because of this silvery glow. Now, you may have heard of mugwort and wormwood from different shows like Harry Potter and his herbology class had to use a lot of these things as well. And it is a plant that has been used for a very long time. It has a long history of use with people. And the name comes from, well, wort means plant, and mugwort may very well be derived from the fact that it was used in beer before hops. So hops was incorporated into beer because it was kind of a preservative. And before hops were used, mugwort was one of the plants that was used to help keep the beer preserved. So again, all these plants are sort of moon-oriented plants, and we find that that is one of the other sort of lore about mugwort is that it was used to protect us against evil spirits and parasitic entities and all kinds of dark energies and things like that. And we see this in a variety of different types of cultures. Now, those some of those things, parasitic entities, parasites is one of the uses, the herbal uses of mugwort. And other artemisias as well have been used in that regard. But it's probably most well known as being a dream enhancer. And part of the reason is that mugwort is it's a gentle nervine and somewhat of a hypnotic, which means it just helps to promote a more restful sleep. And if you have a restful sleep, you're more likely to go into a dream state and be able to experience a connection with your dreams. The other things that it's used for is, again, with the moon and moon cycles, it's actually very useful for a lot of women's um, female reproductive system, help with um, just helping to get good menstrual flow and also to help with cramping because it does have a bit of an antispasmodic tendency as well. And so lots of different ways that it can be used in that regard. However, it is not to be used during pregnancy. So other times during your monthly cycle is when you would be looking to mugwort to possibly help, depending on what your specific symptoms were. Now, this antispasmodic aspect also can be helpful in the digestive system, as well as the fact that it is a digestive stimulant and it helps to stimulate the different digestive juices and bile and help get the digestion going. And a lot of this has to do with the volatile oils that are present in mugwort. And they're very aromatic, and this is what causes the stimulation and part of it has to do also with this nervine aspect of mugwort, where it's relaxing and stimulating at the same time. Plants are amazing, aren't they? Now, one of the really, before I go anymore, I want to show you some pictures because there's a really interesting use of mugwort that I want to share with you. Now, here's just another picture of the leaf and the plant itself growing. And in these images, you can see, I put these in here because I wasn't sure if I would find a mugwort out in my garden, but you can kind of see how the silver underside shows up in these. And a lot of times on the left side, you can see how the stem can even get really almost reddish in color. And they can grow very tall. That I've seen them, well, typically they're probably around 3 to 4 feet, but I have seen them taller than that. And here is some mugwort that is in flower. So you can see how incredibly small they are. And some people, I think it might be related to ragweed. I'm trying to remember, but and so since they're wind pollinated, you could be an allergen to some people. Now, what I wanted to tell you about next was this very interesting use for mugwort in traditional Chinese medicine called moxibustion. So mugwort is burned in for several different uses. On the right, you'll see a smudge stick, which I'm going to show you a little bit later. But also, this moxibustion is they take kind of the scraping off the hairs off of the mugwort and make that into like an incense almost. And then it is placed on the skin. Now, sometimes it's actually placed on there in order to blister the skin and cause a reaction in the body, but other times it's just used to warm the skin. And the reason why this is done is in my research on it, I am not a TCM practitioner and haven't done that much work with it. There are so many reasons and so many ways you would use it. And generally it's used along the same points as acupuncture points. But one of the reasons why the mugwort is so good is because it's somewhat anti-rheumatic, which means it's good for sort of rheumatism and stiff joints. And so this allows either toxins to be released from the joints, or the warming allows more sort of nourishment to move towards the joints themselves and helps to bring in more nutrition and strength to the plants themselves. Now, another way that you can use it is again with a smudge stick. And many of you have probably heard of smudging with sage. And sage is the most commonly used smudge, but sage really is a very sacred plant to Native Americans. And sadly, it has been over harvested so that, suburban housewives can like cleanse their space and be all groovy. So I highly recommend, if you like to smudge, give up your white sage and look to mugwort instead. Remember, it's kind of a weed, so there's always going to be plenty of that around. Now, again, smoke itself and the burning and smudging, we talk about it from a more, I'm going to clean the energy of my house. And that was kind of how it was originally used. It was thought to smoke out the evil spirits, and was used in places like, or during times such as during the plague, and it was smudged around and so on. And this actually does have a benefit because by bringing in the smoke, it's basically killing off a lot of the airborne pathogens that might have been associated with some of the illnesses. Now, in those days, germs weren't really a thing, and so people are not a thing. They weren't a well-known or understood, and people thought that it was really more an energetic infestation, if you will, that was causing a lot of these illnesses, such as the plague. So you can make your own smudge stick, but let me just tell you, you won't be making a smudge stick out of a dried piece like this. You have to make a smudge stick from something fresh. So if you live somewhere where mugwort is still growing, you can harvest some of that, and you're basically just going to bundle it up as tight as possible. You can add other herbs to it. Lavender is a nice thing to add, and there's a bunch of different ones. You can also add mugwort to a herbal smoke blend if that's something that you like to enjoy as well. And so then, where's my smudge stick? Oh, here it is. You're simply going to hold them tight together, and then you just say, okay, this is not a very good smudge stick, but it is mugwort, okay? And you're just going to simply bind it in a sort of a crisscross with some sort of cotton that is burnable. And then when it's time to smudge, you simply light the end of it. Now, of course, the likelihood of some ashes and things falling off are there. So you're going to want, if you're smudging, you're going to carry something around with you to gather the ashes in the case that they fall off and you don't burn your nice carpet, right? So that is just one way that you can use mugwort to help cleanse your area. Now, mugwort, that's all I wanted to say about that. Oh my gosh. All right, friends, I'm only on page 2 of my notes. So get ready for, oh no, I'm not. I'm on page 5. All right. I lost it. Okay. So the flower essence, I want to talk a little bit about the flower essence of mugwort because, as you can imagine, it helps us with our dream state. But there is something really interesting I wanted to share. As you all know, I'm a huge fan of Matthew Wood, and I use this book, and he also has a companion book that goes with this, for research for my shows. Pretty much always using some information out of this book. And one of the things, the way he organizes his plant information is he'll have a narrative and then he'll have sort of bullet points under different categories like respiratory system or reproductive system or whatever it might be. And then he also has a section called constitutional indications, like if someone has this more tendency or personality or so on, then the plant is likely a good match for them. And often it's kind of like one sentence, or maybe there isn't really anything listed about it. But mugwort had so many different things, and I found them to be so interesting. So there are indications. This would be the personality type that could use some mugwort. They are people who are very much in their head. They're very intelligent, and they spend a lot of time sort of thinking, and they're creative and artistic. But what happens is they have a difficulty sort of communicating that because there's so much in their head. So perhaps they can't remember like simple words, but they can describe a complex concept. They get very angry when other people can't follow their thought process. They kind of mumble sometimes when speaking. Might have sleep disorders because they're thinking and their imagination is very, very active. Their body seems to be asleep, but their mind is awake, right? And they might have sleepwalking or chronic insomnia. So these indications I thought were so interesting that I wanted to share them with you. All right, let me get more organized here. There we go. So some of these things really, to me, that sounds kind of like almost a quote ADD type of person that's kind of in their head all the time. I do not know and have not seen that is indicated for that, but it might be worth doing a little bit of extra research if some of these things seem ring true for you. Now, the flower essence specifically, I wanted to read a quote from Flower Essence Services, which is sort of the big research institute in addition to the Bach flower essences. And what they say, their first sentence about mugwort is, the soul is only half alive if it does not experience itself while asleep. I thought, wow, that is a really interesting perspective to look at how we are two sort of parts of ourselves, this veil between our waking and our sleeping. Here's another place where this comes in with mugwort. And so what happens is mugwort enhances our ability to kind of more have better access to our dreams and understand them and get messages from our dreams. And it also helps us to be more in, when we're awake, we're in the waking world, and when we're asleep, we're in the sleeping world, and helps us to sort of come out of this dream state and be able to function better in the world. So if someone is constantly thinking and daydreaming and creative, and sometimes they're not really able to be in this world. And Soulflower Essences says that Mugwort opens and expands your consciousness to embrace all that you are, light and dark, body and spirit, helping you to integrate all the aspects of yourself into practical life. And then this is also indicated for people who might actually have some sort of extreme experiences, such as disturbing or vivid dreams, irrational thoughts, just kind of panic attacks, and things like that, where they're feeling like their psyche is really not that stabilized. So, mugwort flower essence can be helpful for people like that. Now, tonight we are going to have the oracle card for the Wheel of the Year that I originally started in December of 2021. So the Wheel of the Year is a spread that's used with tarot cards, or you could use it with any kind of card. And each of the cards indicates the different transition points in the year. So I started with the winter solstice. In Celtic tradition, this is actually the beginning of the year. Samhain's the beginning of the year. And each one of these sort of solstice or cross quarter points had a card. And then we had a card of the year, and I almost forgot about it, but it was hemlock was our card of the year. And that card represented the different structures and boundaries, and how are you, do you have enough of them? Do you have too many of them? And how has that been for you this year, looking at those sorts of things? And then this card tonight is, again, from is mugwort, and it is the, oh, let me share it with you. Stand by. And it is the High Priestess card. And so this is sort of the feminine energy card, the ultimate, there's the Emperor card and the High Priestess cards, and these are like the ultimate uh feminine energy, again associated with the moon. And the words on the card are follow the fragrance of mystery. I think that's alluding to mugwort's volatile scent. Awaken ancient memory. Divine messages in dreams and visions. So this picture here shows it's a dream pillow. Someone's making a dream pillow, and they've got the thread and they've got the mugwort ready to go in, along with some uh, rose hips and some other types of resins that they're going to be putting into the dream pillow. And they message on the other part of the card is basically just saying that, right this time of year, there's a lot of sort of mystery around as we get dark. If we're spending more time in the dark and we're starting to think about these things, and that sometimes we need to just kind of just figure out what that is. So, in other words, we need to acknowledge sort of the shadow side of ourselves in order for us to work with it. And mugwort is a plant that helps us work sort of with this shadow side of ourselves rather than to be afraid of the shadow side. Now, these things, the card says, they're your secrets. And it's really important that you do this work, but you don't have to share them. It's not something that you have to be um, admitting. It's your inner work that you're doing. And so tonight, I also wanted to share with you, and I warned you this is going to be an extra long show. A friend of mine gave me a brand new card deck for my birthday last week, or 2 weeks ago, whenever it was. And it's called the Herbal Astrology Oracle, and it's by this woman, Adriana. I don't know how to say her last name, Ayales or something like that. I think she's Latino or something. And it's just a beautiful card where it talks about all the different plants that and their sort of uh, the planet that they're associated with. And so again, mugwort is associated with the moon, and the messages from this card were, oops, I almost hit the wrong button there. And here it is. It's got this beautiful artwork. And this image here is the goddess Diana and the mugwort and the moon phases above her head. And what the message from this is about our psychic powers. Again, perfect for this time of year and the things that we're working on during this season. And what the card says is that if you enter the liminal space between one light phase and the next, so this veil that we've been talking about, it might not actually be between, the spirit world and between the waking world. It could be for you between your emotional world and your mental world. It could be between a transition that you're making in your life. So whatever that transition space is, your channel is wide open right now. This is a good time to be open to receive the information. And when we're working with these sort of shadow sides, the greatest clarity dawns after the darkest hour. So sometimes we got to go deep into this really part of ourselves really don't want to go into because it's not the pretty part that we like about ourselves. It might be some of the things that we really don't like about ourselves. And this is important, though. Can't ever we can't ever solve a problem if we don't admit that we have it in the first place, right? So the mugwort and all of the other plants in this family are all moon allies. And so these, again, represent this aspects of ourselves. And mugwort is here to help you dive into some of these aspects of yourself by giving you more clarity and connection. And sometimes if we receive a message and we just don't understand what it is, that's difficult. So by having mugwort, now mugwort, you can drink a tea, you can do a smudge stick, you can do these things. But the truth is, you can just always just call in the spirit of mugwort to help you in these sorts of transitions and in these sorts of work that you're doing. And get a better understanding for what messages are that you are actually receiving. And one of the great things to do this, and this has to do with the smudging, and I'm actually going to light my smudge stick that I made 10 years ago. It's about intention setting. So as I wrap up Flower Power, here, my 100th show, I thought that I would go ahead and give you the opportunity to create an intention. Move everything out of the way so I don't light anything on fire. Hopefully my husband's watching upstairs. So you know, if you see the flames going up, come down and rescue me. Is to set an intention for this rest of this year going forward and a whole year going forward or whatever it might be, or just for this few days. We're still coming out of a new moon and it's a great time for intention setting. So as I let me see, I don't know if this will work or not, but I wanted to just quickly light this. I'm just going to light it. If I just put out my candle. That didn't work. Oh, come on. And I want to set the intention of gratitude for those of you who have followed my show and been a part of it for almost 2 years. Thank you so much for that. I look forward to sort of revamping. I also look forward to not having the commitment of a live show every week, and seeing what else and what other creativity, with the help of Mugwort, channel my creativity into something else. So thank you again so much for joining me. And I would love to hear from you. If you've enjoyed Flower Power, please write in the comments below, what is your favorite part of Flower Power? Do you like the more part about gardening? Do you like the medicinal use? Are you liking the messages of Flower Power and the different spiritual and personal growth messages that come out from each one? So thank you so much, everyone, for joining me. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the fall. I'm likely to do a winter solstice show. So stay tuned for that. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.